Hey y'all, welcome back to the shop. This is Terry. Doing something a little special today. We've been playing with this new Talon back here, 19 Talon X. Just got it a few weeks ago. Had it out for a ride yesterday, and all the things that that we tried to conquer, we conquered with no problem whatsoever. But as several people have talked about that have these, they are sprung just too stiff. It's really an interesting deal what Honda's done here and what a lot of UTV manufacturers apparently have done. But the rear tender springs, we'll show you that in just a little bit, are actually cranked down till they're absolutely in coil bind. So on the rear, the front's not so bad, but on the rear, it's almost like a spacer back there instead of tender springs in the first place. So we're going to try something different here. These are tender springs from the folks at Bandit UTV Suspensions, and Ted over there. These are not my forte, so I've been like 101 questions for Ted, and he's been great about helping me understand. So we have a pair for the rear, a pair for the front, and we're going to swap these out today, and then we'll do another ride video. We're going again next weekend, so we'll do a ride video next weekend to see how they do. So stay tuned. Let's go around. We're going to look at these shocks and then get to it. All right, let's look at these springs and shocks that come on this. These are exactly the way that Honda had them set up. I haven't done anything to them. The front's really not so bad. I mean, you can see plenty of space here. The tender spring has plenty of room to work and everything's good. So the front's really not too bad. The rear is where the problem really is. So back here you can see the tender spring is nearly compressed completely, and it's really acting more like a spacer than it is a spring. So it's really crazy how Honda has this. I noticed yesterday as we were riding and seeing some other riders that practically every RZR, everything that we saw had rear springs cranked down very similar to this. So pretty crazy, but you can see obviously that tender spring's not doing anything. So hopefully we'll get the Bandit stuff on there and we'll have springs that actually work. Be right back and we'll start changing them. All right, y'all, we're going to go all the way through one of these shocks as far as changing it and kind of show you the differences here. This is the Bandit front tender, and this is the stock front tender. The Bandit is definitely heavier wire, so I'm assuming it's a higher rate. Don't know that for sure. It's definitely shorter. And we've already got one of them installed over here. And just want to show you the procedures here. No fancy, really anything is required. Pretty much just hammer and a flat screwdriver to turn the spanners. I actually do have a spanner wrench, so I'll be turning it with a spanner wrench just because it's a little bit faster. And then snap ring pliers is the easiest way that I have seen to get the C-clip or whatever you want. I don't know what the proper name for it is, but anyway, the clip out of the bottom of the shock to get everything apart, and then a really little small screwdriver to help get that thing going. So pretty simple deal. I did clean the shock. We rode yesterday, and it wasn't muddy, but it was in the mud. And $24 at the car wash apparently didn't do it because it was still nasty. So I cleaned the shocks as best I could, and I get a little shot of WD-40 on these threads because they are very fine, and I want to make for sure they don't get anything caught in there. So let's get a little WD-40 on here. We'll wipe it off the springs and we'll get going on. All right, these shocks are left and right, so that they are side specific here. So you don't want to get them mixed up. The left-hand side, I'm sorry, we've already done. This is the right-hand side, and basically just a matter of taking the screwdriver in these slots, getting this nut going. All right, once that nut's loose, you can just run this one all the way to the top, because on the fronts especially, you got to have as much room as you can get to get the to get the clip out of the bottom that we'll do here in just a minute. And like I said before, these threads are super fine, and you want to have them clean and have some lube on there so you don't gall anything up, because that would be a super bad deal all the way around for everybody involved. All right, so let's get the main one moving. It'll take a little bit here, so just bear with me, and here we go. All right, we're finally about there, so let's finish spinning this up. So you can see that there is a point you finally get the tension off of it where you can spin the thing and get it right on up there. And you need to spin it that far, I mean all the way. Got to get the tension here, the tension off of the bottom of the shock here, because this little clip, there's a little round clip that's in a groove right there, and that's what's got to get out of there. That's literally what holds the shock together. So, all right, I'm gonna stick this in my woodworking vise. I mean, there's probably 50 different ways you could do it, but that's the best and easiest way I have to do it, so that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm going to reposition a little bit here so you can see a little bit better what we're doing, hopefully. All right, so right in here is that clip, and it's got a little separation in it. So like I said, the best way that I could find, there really isn't a great way. I'm sure there's some tool for it, but this is a redneckville, so this is what we got. So the best way I could find is just to get it started with the snap ring pliers like that, and then literally it'll just come right off. So that simple as that. And it's just a matter of pulling off the collar. We're going to pull that collar off, pull the mainspring off, set it aside, pull off the spacer, the factory tender spring out of there, my other tender spring, my Bandit tender spring on, put that down, and just reverse the procedure. Spacer, mainspring. Since this spring is shorter, obviously you have a whole lot more space to work with here than you did before, so with that longer one. So like I said, I don't know anything about this. Ted at Bandit, it really seems extremely knowledgeable to me, so go with what he says here. They do not, I know this question is going to be asked, so I'll answer it right now. Bandit does not use crossovers. The crossover is one of those debated things, and some shock folks use them and some don't, but Bandit does not. So we're going to run with what they got here. So from here, it's just a matter of running this shock back up. And let me reposition here just a second, and we'll get a little wider shot so you can see. So it's just a matter of running this back up. Bandit recommends on these front shocks a 5 inches of preload. So from the bottom of this shock head to the top of this locking nut is 5 inches. This is the other front shock, the left-hand shock, and I've already got it set up. So that's what it should look like when it's done. Basically, the rears are exactly the same procedure. The rears are also side specific, so you want to make for sure you get the right back on the right and the left back on the left. All in all, a super easy procedure. Both front shocks I started about an hour ago, and including messing with the camera and a couple different takes here and there. So it took me about an hour to go literally from start to here. And from here, just a matter of running this other shock down and bolting these back on. So pretty quick, easy procedure. Like I said, I use the spanner wrench, but you don't really need it. You can just keep tapping that thing around there. with the screwdriver and do exactly the same thing. So. All right, y'all, hey, I got the front done, and I wasn't really planning on showing anything on the rears. I mean, the procedures are exactly the same, so didn't seem like there'd be that much to see on the rear, but once I got the first rear shock off, there was something that I wanted to show you, and this is it. So if you remember, this shock was literally in coil bind with the weight of the Talon on it, and you can see how utterly wimpy that spring has got to be. Because now that spring, there's 2.5 inches there of that spring. It'll be interesting to see when we get it off how long that spring actually is, because it was squeezed down to about an inch, and it's 2.5 inches with the weight off of it. So we'll swap these out, and I'll come right back in a second, and we'll see where we are with the Bandit tenders on it. Hey, I decided when I got these apart that I wanted to come back and just show you this. Obviously, I'm not a spring guy, so I'm learning just like most of y'all are what the difference in these just really got me. So this is the factory spring, and it's 3 inches, and the wire diameter is about 350 thousandths. So, and it is wimpy. I mean, I can actually compress it just with my hands. Pretty amazing to me, and absolutely no surprise that it's in coil bind when it's on the machine, no matter how the preload's set up. So like I said, that thing, it had about an inch of preload on that spring. I think we're about 2.5 inches if I remember right. Now this spring, however, this is our Bandit spring, and it is 3.5 inches here, and it's about 455 thousandths wire, so it's way heavier. And this spring, I'm not compressing it with my hand. So just really interesting to me, the difference in just the theory of what Honda had going on and what the aftermarket Bandit UTV spring is. So really interested to see how this is going to turn out, and we'll be back and show you these rear shocks when I get them together. All right, you guys, just wanted to come back and show you this shock. Kind of like we talked about before, this was a like 3.5 inch spring. Preload, I think, brought it down to 3 1/4, and now that's on the machine, it is 3 inches. So you can see how much room there that the spring has to work. I mean, it just has way many more times than the stock setup did. And we're going to run around. It's raining, but we're going to go settle out these springs, and we'll be back with kind of a little final report on how it is. Let me get the front up here while we're at it. See the front. It's compressed a little bit more, but it's really interesting how that works, because we'll talk about it later. I want to go get them settled first, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so everything's back on and torqued and ready to go. It is pouring down rain here today. Seems like I say that on every video, because it started raining about 6 or 8 months ago, and it doesn't seem like it stopped. So it's rained like 7 inches here today. So couldn't really do anything much around the neighborhood other than just run around the streets on the neighborhood. But I did that to get everything to settle out. And I will say, I mean, I can already tell that this is going to be much softer and smoother than what it was. I'm still just a little bit amazed really at the difference in just the school of thought on how to do these springs and spring rates and lengths and preloads and all that in general, between what Honda did and these Bandit UTV suspension springs. So tail of the tape, these measurements, the front, I measured the front right to the larger hole in the skid plate, just about the flattest place that I could see under there to measure. And we had 14.5 inches of ground clearance before, and now we have 15.5. So we gained an inch with these springs. So the rear, I measured right at the very back of the skid plate itself, before it transitions into that little like tow hook thing that's on the back of it. So the big flat place on the rear skid plate. And before we had 14 1/4, and now we have 15 1/2 there. So we gained 1 inch on the front, 1 1/4 on the back. I'm sure they might settle a little bit more. I did, jam on the brakes and do all those things that you do to make the spring settle. So overall, I think this is going to be really good. Before, whenever I would just, grab the roll bar from the side, shake it in the back, I mean, you can see the tires flexing, but basically the shocks were doing almost nothing. And now the shocks actually are working. Same story on the front. Even though the aftermarket springs are shorter and of a heavier wire, it just seems softer in the front. So we'll see how it goes. Like I said, we're going to go next weekend. We're going to ride in a different place, but everything is a big giant pile of rocks where we live. So kind of almost doesn't matter where you ride. It's kind of the same thing. My wife was with me yesterday, and I meant to have a bunch of ride video, but I discovered whenever we got to the trail that my GoPro was still sitting right here on the bench in the shop. So we tried some handheld stuff, but it's just too rough for that. So no, those videos are not very good. So, but my wife was there, and Cheryl's a good judge of these things. So we'll see what she thinks about it as far as the ride goes, and my own thoughts. And we'll definitely have the GoPro next weekend, so we'll be able to get some video for you. All in all, pretty simple project. It took me about 2.5 hours to do it, including messing around with the camera, a couple different takes, and a couple things that I learned. That one thing I've already touched on already is those threads are so fine on the shock bodies that if you've got compressed air, you really need to blow those out, clean those out. I finally got a little plastic bristle brush that I use in my parts washer and just hosed them down with simple green and scrubbed with those, because even after just one ride yesterday, the least little piece of grit that's in those threads will cause you trouble. And that's why you saw when I skipped ahead on the one shock that I was going to do on camera to show you the process. That was the deal there. There was a little, a nothing piece of grit was in there. Didn't hurt the threads or anything. It just made it a bear to turn the spanner. So can't emphasize enough how much to get those threads clean and lubed up with some WD-40 or something before you start. Also, you'll see it's a simple deal, but on the rear, those shields that are on the front of the shocks, they've got a little tang on them that has to fit through a slot in the bottom of the shock. Simple enough deal, you'll see that. The preloads, like I said, it's set to from the base of the shock head to the top of that locking ring at 5 inches on the front, 4 inches on the back. And I did not need, I was able to turn the spring and get all that preload on all 4 corners by hand. So pretty simple deal. Like I said, tune in. Next video we'll have will be a ride video, and we'll get some opinions from the wife on how the ride was. That's probably the most important opinion, probably more important than mine. But so far, I don't see anything but good here. Sure seems like the suspension is going to work a lot better now. But we'll test it on the trails and be back. Don't hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Appreciate all of y'all and every subscriber out there and everybody that stops by the channel. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you.